China can activate nationalism, right, to distract people from its domestic problems by getting into disputes with Japan about the Senkaku Islands. Right? Is everyone familiar with the Senkaku Island problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can explain that.
Yeah, so Senkaku Islands are these basically rocks that are near Taiwan and Okinawa, but China and Japan both lay claim to them.
Because of the waters.
Yeah, and around the waters of it, they suspect there's natural resources. But last year there was a fishing boat captain, right? There was a Japanese Coast Guard crashed into well, it's actually the Chinese captain crashed into the Japanese Coast Guard. Okay, you could argue that so people said, well, why is China doing this? Because China kind of worked up its population, and what a lot of people will argue is that China likes to distract its citizens from domestic problems by focusing on an external threat. Does the argument make sense? Is it possible? Do you think that's possible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Like logically it fits. So you could argue that's a state level explanation. Yeah. The Clinton explanation is just kind of a funny story. Right. I mean, but that's the idea of diversionary war theory. To distract people from domestic problems. Okay. So I mentioned this also before. The rally round the flag effect. Rally round the flag effect. I think you laughed when I mentioned this theory before. Okay. The rally round the flag effect. What they found is that it's presidential opinion polls. Okay. So the president's opinion is like this, and then this is done in the case of America, the studies have been done. If there's a war, if a war starts, basically Americans will suddenly increase presidential approval. Okay, right? That makes sense. Yeah. But what happens is that the effect of this approval is like this. We'll go down. So if you look at public opinion polls, right? So this is time, and then this is approval. Okay. So if you look at public opinion polls of President Bush after the Iraq War, okay, it shot up after the Iraq War because people feel, yeah, this is great. This is that's what's called the rally around the flag effect, because you rally around the flag. You all feel proud because of nationalism, things like that. Okay, but the longer the war goes on, people begin to disapprove of the president's approval, right? Because basically you're saying, what the hell, you got to get us out of this thing you've gotten us into now, right? Yeah.
So in this theory, for example, the first Bush, if you have a war that's very quickly and it's over, how does that affect your popularity? Does this theory say it stays?
Yeah, this theory would say that's the best thing you can do.
So it goes up and it just stays.
And well, it depends on other factors, because like the first President Bush, he lost the next election because of the economy. The American economy tanked, right? But he was able to maintain this effect for a certain period of time. That's the case study that people argue the rally effect is not very long. It's a temporary effect. But just think about what if we applied this if we want to understand why President Obama went to war in Libya, which they're not calling a war, they're calling hostilities. Okay? But anyway, I call it a war because they're dropping bombs on people, so we call it a war for our class. Okay? So President Obama, you could argue, maybe not him or his political advisors, but what he basically thought was that this war would be over quickly. I mean, it's Colonel Gaddafi, right? How long is he going to last? Okay? But what's actually happened is the war's dragged on, and I don't think it's actually having an effect on his popularity because Obama has so many other problems, right? With the economy and everything else. But I've seen public opinion polls about support for the war, and that is significantly decreasing. Initially, support was high.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was relatively high because it was framed as a humanitarian intervention. It looked like America, and first of all, it was framed as a humanitarian intervention, which means because Libya was abusing the human rights of its people, America has a duty to go in and protect the people. Okay? So because of that, but also because it wasn't an American war, it was a NATO war. So people thought, yeah, well, this is good. America is working through multilateral institutions, right? Which it didn't for the Iraq war. But what's happened is that support for that war has totally decreased. And people are basically tired of it. Because I remember when the war started, if I remember right, someone in the White House said, this will be over in a matter of days. Okay, and that was March. Okay, and I don't know if you're reading about the war, but it's not really on the front pages anymore, but it's still going on. Right? Okay. It's still going on. So anyway, that's called the rally around the flag effect, and it's related to the theory of diversionary war.